In March this year, the United States instructed Chevron, the world's largest energy company, to shut down its oil operations in Venezuela, with a full withdrawal deadline set for April. This effectively marked the end of the U.S. sanctions waiver on Venezuelan oil. Shortly after, President Trump announced a new policy. Any country importing Venezuelan oil or gas would face a 25% tariff. While the stated target is Venezuela, the real impact falls heavily on China, which is Venezuela's biggest oil buyer. This tariff poses a serious threat to China's energy supply chain. Surprisingly, though, China didn't cut back on Venezuelan oil imports. In fact, import volumes surged. Data from March 2025 suggests Venezuela shipped around 400,000 barrels of crude oil per day to China, possibly hitting the highest level since mid-2023. So why is Trump reintroducing sanctions on Venezuelan oil? And why is China ignoring the pressure? Let's start with some context. Venezuela holds one of the world's largest proven oil reserves, about 300 billion barrels, or 18% of global reserves. According to OPEC, Venezuela's daily oil output hit 1.031 million barrels in January 2025, up by 33,000 barrels from the month prior. It ranks fifth globally in oil production and is the top producer in the Western Hemisphere. With such resources, Venezuela should be among South America's wealthiest nations, but the reality is very different. Despite improvements, inflation remains sky high, far above the regional average. One key reason: the U.S. shale oil boom. After America became the world's top oil producer around 2016, it slashed imports, leading to a global oil glut and plunging prices. In 2017, to shield its domestic energy sector, the United States imposed severe sanctions on Venezuela's oil industry, including secondary sanctions that discouraged third-party trade. These actions crushed Venezuela's production, which fell from 1.9 million barrels a day to just 350,000 by 2020. Oil has long made up about a third of Venezuela's GDP and over half its government revenue, so these sanctions hit hard. Still, Venezuela refused to bow to U.S. pressure. In 2019, it formally cut diplomatic ties with Washington, a rare move globally. Then, under the Biden administration, the United States began to ease restrictions, especially after the war in Ukraine disrupted global energy supplies. By late 2022, U.S. firms were allowed to resume oil operations in Venezuela. These companies ended up producing about a quarter of the country's total output and accounted for roughly one-third of its exports. On the surface, sanctions seemed to be softening. But this was misleading. Fast forward to 2025. Trump returns and quickly reverses course. In March, he signed a new executive order in the White House, reintroducing sanctions and tariffs targeting all countries importing Venezuelan oil, up to 25%. This move was justified by claims that Venezuela was hostile to the United States and had even sent criminals across the border. But in reality, many see this as a backdoor attempt to target China. Venezuela responded harshly, calling the sanctions illegal and politically motivated. Economists also point out the deeper motive weakening China. Here's why. China is Venezuela's largest oil customer. As of 2024, Venezuela produced around 735,000 barrels of crude daily, and nearly 70% of its oil exports, about 500,000 barrels per day, went to China. Chinese firms have also heavily invested in Venezuela's oil fields, and those investments are now starting to pay off. So while the United States claims it's sanctioning Venezuela, it's really trying to choke off China's oil supply. Add this to the broader trade picture. Trump has already imposed a 20% tariff on all Chinese imports and an extra 25% on steel and aluminum. If China continues buying Venezuelan oil, the implied retaliatory tariff burden on its goods could reach 45% and up to 70% on metals. It's clear that Trump's strategy is to use energy as a pressure point in the broader trade war with China. Venezuela is just the lever. By penalizing buyers of Venezuelan oil, the United States aims to disrupt China's critical supply lines. Trump's strategy fits neatly into his broader trade war playbook, using secondary sanctions to block China's access to low-cost energy. The message is clear. If China doesn't align with United States energy policy, it could face even steeper tariffs, possibly rising to 60% or even 100%. Trump had already stated during his campaign that he would consider slapping tariffs in that range on Chinese imports. Based on recent developments, he may be systematically working toward that goal. China, as Venezuela's long-standing strategic partner, has deep-rooted energy cooperation with the country, largely structured through oil-for-loan agreements. As the world's largest manufacturing nation, responsible for over 30% of global industrial output, energy is an irreplaceable lifeline for China. From 2007 to 2017, China invested over $55 billion in Venezuela, with a major chunk directed at its oil industry. Simply put, Venezuela is a crucial energy partner China has no intention of letting go. So how is China responding to the pressure? When the United States declared a 25% tariff on countries importing Venezuelan oil and gas, many expected China to scale back. Instead, Chinese energy traders ramped up their buying. In March 2025, Venezuela's crude oil exports to China were estimated to hit 400,000 barrels per day, a record high since mid-2023. Clearly, China understands that no matter what, the United States is likely to keep increasing tariffs. So instead of backing down, China is fighting back. It has imposed tariffs of 10 to 15% on United States energy products, agricultural machinery, and even 711 categories of agricultural goods. United States car exports to China once plunged by 70%, placing immense pressure on American automakers. And even if Washington continues imposing new tariffs, the pain will likely hit United States consumers hardest. The 25% tariff could cost Americans an extra $5.2 billion annually in fuel, while up to 260,000 oil and gas workers in Texas alone face job uncertainty. Meanwhile, other countries are rallying around China. Brazil and Argentina have joined the China-Venezuela Energy Cooperation Framework. Chinese engineers are laying submarine fiber optic cables and building a new economic ecosystem that blends infrastructure with energy development. As a result, Venezuela's non-oil exports surged 67% in just one quarter. This economic shift is helping Venezuela break its long-standing dependency on oil, the so-called resource curse. China, for its part, has never relied on just one source of oil. Through the Belt and Road Initiative, it's built a global energy supply web. Crude oil trade with Russia alone has hit 46 million tons, and China has signed massive energy agreements with Saudi Arabia worth hundreds of billions of dollars. In short, China isn't worried about losing access to energy. It's more than ready to withstand U.S. sanctions. And Venezuela isn't the only flashpoint. The U.S. has also started pressuring China over its oil imports from Iran. In March, the U.S. Treasury announced new restrictions targeting Chinese firms buying Iranian crude. The announcement referenced a so-called shadow fleet of 150 aging tankers that have been transporting discounted oil for Iran and Russia since 2020. According to the U.S., some of this oil ends up in China, while other shipments go to Houthi-controlled regions in Yemen. Washington alleges that by purchasing Iranian oil, certain companies are indirectly funding Houthi forces in Iran. In response, the U.S. slapped sanctions on a Chinese terminal that received this crude. It's evident that the U.S. is closing in on China's energy supply chain, intensifying pressure across multiple fronts. But it's also clear to many observers that these aggressive sanctions are just one part of a bigger geopolitical chess match. So the question remains, can the U.S. really succeed in cutting off China from key energy sources? To stay updated on this evolving situation, and more stories like it, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. We'll keep delivering deep dives and high-impact global insights.